everyone, and welcome back to Clara Sews Vintage. Today we're going to be talking about how I made this 1950s style jumper dress. You might remember about a month ago in my fall and winter sewing plans video, which I will have linked down below if you haven't seen it. I got this corduroy from Mood Fabric earlier this fall, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I love the color. It's just so autumnal to me, and I really just love it. And it's so rich looking with the corduroy. And I believe I talked about in that video how I was planning to make a jumper dress out of it. And so here is the finished result of those plans. Spoiler alert, I absolutely love how it turned out. I suppose I should probably wait until the end of the video to say that, but I don't really have a poker face, so I love it. It's not really a secret. But yeah, so I am, like I said, I'm super, super happy with how it turned out. I did have a little freak out moment when I tried it on part of the way through, and I was afraid that I had somehow managed to get the fit completely wrong, but I didn't, and it fits really, really well. I'm really happy with it. It fits a little bit differently than I originally thought the mock-up was going to, because the corduroy is so much thicker and stiffer than my mock-up fabric. But in the end it all worked out, and I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. But yeah, so without further rambling from me, let's go ahead and jump into making the dress. I've been planning to do an entirely separate mock-up fitting video and all of that, but once again, this pattern turned out to be relatively boring as far as fitting goes, which I'm certainly not complaining about, but that wouldn't make for a very interesting video. So I'm just going to include kind of my thought processes and what I did in this video instead, since it should be pretty abbreviated. So when I tried the mock-up on, I think going into making the mock-up, the only thing that I changed was I knew from comparing this to my waistcoat pattern that I was going to need for sure to shorten the waist a little bit. So I went ahead and I believe I shortened it by about 1.25 inches going into making the first mock-up. So it was actually really close upon my first attempt. I also shortened the bottom by, I think, about 2 or 2.5 inches, just right off the bat. So I noted like 3 main things in the mock-up try-on. So I noticed that I needed to bring the waist up still, so I ended up bringing that up a little bit more. Now, keep in mind, I'm very short and I'm very short-waisted, so most people wouldn't have to shorten the waist nearly as much as I ended up doing. But, so I ended up shortening it by about 2 inches total, so because it's 1 inch folded, so that's multiplied by 2. So I ended up shortening it by another 3/4 of an inch from what I had already done. I also noticed that the shoulders were just a tiny bit wide for the way that I wanted them to fit, which was really surprising because I hadn't altered the shoulder at all before I made the mock-up, and usually I have to narrow things pretty significantly. So I was really surprised how well the shoulders fit. I think partly because this is a sleeveless garment. You might like it if I showed you the actual picture. So here's the pattern that I'm making. Just a little refresher. It's Butterick 7049, as you can see here. It's from the 1950's. So it sits pretty wide on the shoulder. And it's sleeveless, so I think that that's why I didn't have to narrow the shoulders too much, because there's a little bit more room for interpretation and error on the width of the shoulder, where if you have a set-in sleeve, it's very noticeable if it's too wide. So I decided, though, that I did want to bring it in just a little bit, and I wanted to still kind of keep the dart coming down the center of the shoulder centered, so I just took in, I guess I ended up taking about 1 inch overall, because it's about 1/4 folded in half and 1/4 folded in half. So I guess that is a pretty significant narrowing, but since I split it up, it doesn't look like as much. So I just did that, and then I also decided that I needed to bring up the shoulder just ever so slightly, but only in the front. The back of the shoulder, like neck area, fit really well, so I just kind of figured out how much I wanted to take off, which I think I took off about 3/8 of an inch, and then I just pinched my dart closed and drew across here and kind of tapered it to the other corner, so it'd be fairly gradual across the shoulder instead of like, you know, really abrupt or whatever. So so I took that in a little bit, took this up a little bit, and it was still very long, so I took another 2.5 inches off the bottom, and that ended up being pretty well perfect. So this is the front piece that I was showing you. So since I made those alterations, oh, and then I also I didn't feel like the dart needed to come down quite as far with this front one that comes through the middle of the shoulder. So I just moved the dart leg up and reconnected, or the dart point, and reconnected my dart legs. And I felt like the darts needed to come up a little bit higher on the ones that are kind of coming up from the waist. So I just, again, moved my dart legs up a little bit and just traced my dart legs. I didn't actually redraw those, so I just, when I traced them, I connected from this point to this point instead of that. So that's all of the changes that I made to the front. And then the corresponding changes that I made to the back, again, sliced to 2.5 inches off the bottom. That was super easy. Raised the waistline again to match the front. And then instead of just completely removing the fullness from the back like I did in the front, because of my scoliosis, I have a bit of a rib hunch. So I decided to take a little bit out, but for a lot of the fullness that I removed from the front, I decided to add a dart on the back of the shoulder, which you see often in like waistcoats or suitings of the 40s and 50s. So I thought that this would be a very historically accurate, I guess, though that's kind of a, I don't know, silly term. But a common practice would be to add a dart on the back, so I decided to just add that style element, which would give me a little bit more fullness across my back. But yeah, so I just kind of lined up on my pattern piece here. I think I showed this in a different clip, but I just lined this up and marked where I needed my dart to start, lined up the shoulder seam, marked there, and then I lined the other side up and marked to see how much fullness I needed to take out, decided how long I wanted my dart, and added that. And then I also brought the darts up a little bit further in the back as well. So that's the extent of my changes for the pattern. So let's go ahead and jump into making the actual dress. final product. Like I said in the intro to the video, I am extremely happy with how it turned out. I had a little freak out where it felt too big. The corduroy is a lot stiffer than the muslin fabric, and so it was just feeling kind of big. But after I tried it on with the sweater that I wanted to wear under it and put the belt on and everything, I think and I hadn't put the buttons on yet, so that's going to definitely affect how it fits and everything, because maybe I didn't have it overlapped quite as much and everything. But in the end, I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. I ended up taking in the center back seam just maybe 3/8 of an inch on each side, so doubled. But so it's just a little bit puffy in the back, and I think that that's from the stiffness of the corduroy. I think if I made this again in a thinner fabric, I wouldn't necessarily need to do that, and it's not a change that I would make in the pattern pieces, because I think it's dependent on what fabric it's made of. But in the end, I think it is really, really cute. I was a little bit worried about these tucks in the corduroy too, since the corduroy is kind of stiff, but I think it turned out to be just fine. Yeah, I'm really, really happy with it. And like I said, I absolutely love the color of the fabric, and it feels really rich and stuff too, and yeah, really, really love it. The other thing is I lowered the armhole a little bit, which I talked about, and I think that was a mistake. It looks okay, it's fine, but I don't think I needed to do that. I think it was me cutting corners on my mock-up. I should have at least trimmed back the seam allowance, even if I wasn't going to actually put bias tape or facing on it. Because I think I underestimated how much of a difference that seam allowance would make, because it felt really tight under my arms, but I really think that it would have been okay. I could have left it the way it was. But it's okay. I think I'll probably change the pattern back to raise the armhole for next time if I make it again. Because like I said, I just don't think that I need the extra room. I don't think it ruins it or anything, but it definitely wasn't necessary, and I think I would like it just a tiny bit better if the armhole was a little bit higher, like it was supposed to be originally. Which I was really surprised how well this fit. I ended up shortening the waist, bringing up the waist quite a fair amount, but up in the chest and shoulder area, I really only had to narrow it a little bit over the shoulders, and that was really the only major change that I made to the pattern. And usually I have to, shorten this area a fair amount and everything. So I was really, really impressed with how this pattern fit kind of out of the box. So if you are a lot less petite than I am, it probably wouldn't fit very well. I think that this fits very on the petite side, but it worked out for me, that's for sure. But yeah, so the final product, like I said, really happy with it, and I definitely see myself making this pattern again. I think it's going to be in my rotation of, patterns that I make over and over again. I think you could change it up a lot depending on what fabric you use to make it look really different from the other versions. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. Have you ever made anything out of corduroy, or what was something that you made over this fall season that you're really happy with? I would love to know in the comments below. I have to say, I was afraid that this corduroy was going to be an absolute fur magnet, because I do have a dog and a cat. I was afraid that it was going to just be an absolute fur magnet, but it really hasn't been catching the hair nearly as much as I was afraid it would. Obviously it picks up a little bit, but everything picks up a little bit of dog hair, so I was really pleasantly surprised by how not hair magnet It is. But yeah, so let me know what you've been working on in the comments below. And yeah, I will see you next time.